Chapter 81 Story Behind Entity 303. Everyone knew him was powerful, but only within the bounds of the game. A GM, on the other hand, was something else entirely, a force that transcended the game's mechanics. No matter how strong him was, it was hard to imagine him defeating a GM. That's why many players believed this was it. The final battle. The end of him. Speculation ran rampant. Live streams about the showdown rocketed to the top of the forums, with more and more players tuning in to witness the event. Steve was among them. Having closely studied everything about him, Steve couldn't help but be awestruck by his meteoric rise. Him's growth was faster than anything he had ever seen. Steve had thought that warning other players would be enough to slow him down. He was wrong. Him's path to power clearly wasn't limited to just defeating players. Still, the appearance of a game GM finally gave Steve some relief. After all, he trusted the GM's abilities. Him was, at the end of the day, just part of the game. It's finally about to end, Steve muttered, watching intently. Xu Yuan had been taking it easy lately. He was giving the Eternal Guild players some breathing room while waiting to rack up enough kills to unlock the Epic Siege mod. During this downtime, Xu Yuan had ventured to the lower realm to gather some rotten flesh. With control of a young ender dragon recently unlocked, Xu Yuan was curious to see if he could raise it to adulthood. There was something special about this ender dragon. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but it was a gut feeling, similar to the one he'd had about 007 and the little zombie before. These days, Xu Yuan alternated between feeding the ender dragon and occasionally tossing some rotten flesh to 007. Neither of them seemed particularly fond of the stuff, though. The ender dragon was easier to handle. Xu Yuan could force it to eat. 007, on the other hand, was unpredictable. Sometimes it would devour the flesh enthusiastically. Other times, it would outright refuse. After shoving a chunk of rotten flesh into the ender dragon's maw, Xu Yuan felt a disturbance from one of his avatars. When he saw the words Admin 303 appear before him, he froze. What? 303 is an admin? The name Entity 303 was familiar to most Minecraft players. His story was a legendary one, second only to him's. Like him, 303's origins were shrouded in mystery. It was said that Entity 303 began as a disgruntled Mojang programmer, fired by Notch for a coding error. Fueled by anger and his deep understanding of Minecraft's code, he created a malicious entity known as 303. This entity would invade players' worlds, killing them or even hacking their computers. If a player encountered him in the game, their screen would fill with error 303 messages. Though Mojang officially debunked the rumors, just as they had with him, the legend persisted. In the lore, Entity 303 was portrayed as nearly as powerful as him. Some even said their strengths were equal. He was said to have 4 lives, growing stronger with each death. The first version of 303 was weak. After his first death, his attack power skyrocketed. By his third life, his appearance began to change, and by his fourth, he became virtually invincible. Players who encountered him in this final form were almost always instantly annihilated. In fan works, him and 303 were often portrayed as rivals. They had clashed in a titanic battle, with him ultimately banishing 303 to the void. But even him couldn't kill him. It was only a temporary imprisonment. If him, the Dark Lord himself, needed 14 minutes to subdue 303, his strength was undeniable. Xu Yuan hadn't expected the world's Admin 303 to be the legendary Entity 303. Are we about to see history repeat itself? While Admin 303's current appearance didn't fully match the legend, aside from his outfit, Xu Yuan doubted it was mere coincidence. Since the Death Knight had already appeared, it was only a matter of time before the other legend surfaced. This Admin 303 would likely evolve into the full-fledged Entity 303 after a series of events, just as 007 had undergone countless trials to become the Death Knight. With that thought, Xu Yuan felt a small sense of relief. At least it's just Admin 303 for now. Even with his current strength, facing Entity 303's fourth form would be suicide. But Admin 303 wasn't exactly easy prey either. He was essentially in creative mode. If he decided to use the command/kill him, things would go south fast. Xu Yuan couldn't help but wonder, could admins in creative mode even kill themselves? It wasn't something he had considered before, but now it was a pressing concern. This was still a game after all. Official intervention was inevitable, and they would all be in creative mode. For Xu Yuan, that was a potential threat. He hadn't learned data manipulation yet. Even if he couldn't be deleted by the GM, he had no way of harming them. For now, Xu Yuan decided to hold off on upgrading his avatar. It would be pointless against a GM in invincible mode. Those resources would be better spent unlocking mods. With a plan in mind, Xu Yuan began controlling his avatar to test the waters. Admin 303 was surprised to see him appear on his own. But he wasn't intimidated. He was in creative mode, while him was nothing more than a peculiar piece of game data. 303 didn't want to waste time. Though he was tempted to toy with him, Old Wu's constant nagging left him no choice. All I need to do is find the code and enter the /kill command, 303 thought, opening his search tool. Within moments, he located him's code. But the string of characters he found made him pause. Yuan, a ± A01. Aside from 01, the rest of the code was gibberish to him. A glitch? But why the 01 foot? As a programmer, 303 recognized the string as nonsense. But the 01 puzzled him. Forget it, he muttered. Ignoring his doubts, he entered the command. /kill? Yuan, a ± A01. The moment he hit enter, him collapsed before him. A system message appeared in the corner of the screen. You have killed? Yuan, a ± A01. That's it? 303 was stunned. The Dark Lord him, a legend with over 20 gigabytes of dedicated fan theories and stories, had fallen to a single command. Nearby players were just as shocked. Holy crap! Instant kill? The GM just obliterated him? What the? I thought there'd be an epic battle. But he just got one shot. No way! I take back all those him is unbeatable posts I made. For the players, him had become a godlike figure after his showdown with the Eternal Guild. His strength and tactics were the stuff of nightmares. Everyone had been bracing for a massive battle. But him, the legendary Dark Lord, couldn't even last a second against the GM. Chapter 82. No data found? The two hadn't even exchanged blows yet, and him was instantly obliterated. The result wasn't surprising, everyone had seen it coming, but the sheer speed of the encounter left players stunned. It was too fast. Some players couldn't process what just happened. Could him be faking his death? That's possible. Remember when Cloud Soar Guild thought him was dead before? Yeah, but if him's pretending to die, doesn't that mean he's afraid of the GM? Hard to say. At the end of the day, isn't him just data? Even Xu Yuan was caught off guard as he watched the clone get destroyed so effortlessly. Before he could process his thoughts, that voice in his head spoke again, cold, furious, and commanding. Go kill him. The voice was undeniably angry, but there was also an unmistakable confidence behind it. Xu Yuan, however, merely let a faint, nearly imperceptible smirk tug at his lips. It worked. Can't find my data? Hearing the voice echo in his mind, Xu Yuan felt reassured. Just as he was about to leave, 007, standing by his side, noticed something was up. My king, is something wrong? Xu Yuan waved him off casually. I need to step out for a bit. Just stay here and don't wander off. Although uneasy, 007 dared not disobey Xu Yuan's orders. Reluctantly, he nodded. As you command. Meanwhile, the live stream chats were flooded with identical reactions. Wait, what? Him got one shot? You've got to be kidding me. Isn't him supposed to be the Demon King? This feels like reading a novel where the protagonist dies out of nowhere mid-story and the book just ends. No, I refuse to believe this. I can't accept it. The absurdity of the situation had left players speechless. But after giving it some thought, the idea of him losing to the GM didn't seem so far-fetched. At the scene, members of the Eternal Guild were ecstatic. They cheered as Him's fading remains disappeared into the void. Holy crap! Jim is amazing! So this is the so-called Demon King Him? What a joke! It's just game data. The GM deleted you like it was nothing. What Demon King? Him is just a bully picking on us regular players. Against the GM? GM? Can you let us down now? We're still dangling up here. Yeah. The wind is literally killing us. 303, who was about to free the suspended players, suddenly froze. A figure had appeared in front of him out of nowhere. He blinked, thinking it was a trick of the light, even rubbing his eyes. But when the figure came into focus, his expression turned to shock. Him. The impossible stood before him. Him, whose body had just dissipated moments ago, was back. 303 was certain of one thing. This him wasn't the same as the one he just defeated. While their appearance and attire were identical, the aura was completely different. Before this, 303 had never quite understood why players described him as radiating an oppressive presence. Now, standing face to face with him's true form, he finally understood. So, the real one is here? Though he didn't know the specifics, 303, being highly familiar with game data, could piece together a theory. Most likely, the him he had erased earlier was just a clone. Thankfully, he had spent hours combing through those 20+ gigabytes of him's data files beforehand. He had a rough grasp of him's abilities. Him's powers stemmed from monsters in the game but were enhanced to terrifying degrees. Explosions, teleportation, webs, all copied from existing entities. For instance, the teleportation came from Little Black, and the web skills were from spiders. So it wasn't hard to deduce that him had a cloning ability derived from slimes. That also explained the earlier system error reading 01. It wasn't a bug, it was a clone. So that 01 was just a copy? The atmosphere shifted the moment him appeared. Eternal Guild players, who were celebrating moments ago, immediately went silent, their faces pale. Him's casual glance in their direction was enough to make several players panic and forcibly disconnect from the game. The psychological damage him inflicted was evident. Viewers in the live streams experienced a roller coaster of emotions. I knew it. Him isn't dead. So that's how he dealt with Cloud Soar Guild before. Let's hope he doesn't get one shot again. At least hold out for a few seconds, okay? I don't think the GM stands a chance this time. Yeah, him never fights battles he's not confident about. If he's here, it's a cleanup operation. Or maybe he's just overconfident? The debate was heated. Most players believed the GM would wipe him out again, but a minority held faith in him's victory. Him had always been cautious. He never initiated a fight unless the odds were overwhelmingly in his favor. In the 3 wars he had waged so far, all were crushing victories. Whenever him appeared, the battle was as good as over. Standing face to face with him, 303, a game administrator, felt an oppressive weight. For the first time, he found himself unnerved. Him's gaze wasn't something that mere game data should be capable of producing. The longer 303 stared, the more unsettled he became. He muttered to himself in an effort to stay calm. It's just data. It's just code. I can delete him just like before. But no amount of self-reassurance could shake the suffocating feeling. Him's presence seemed to peer into the depths of his soul, unearthing his most buried fears. Unable to bear it any longer, 303 averted his gaze and initiated a system scan of him's data. Seconds passed. Then a minute. The bottom left corner of his screen flashed relentlessly with a single message: no data found. 303 broke into a cold sweat. He had scanned him's body directly and even detected him. Yet every search returned the same response: no data found. Again and again he tried. His hands trembled as he entered commands, but the results didn't change. 303 was paralyzed with confusion. How is this possible? He had located the clone's code effortlessly before. But the main body? It was as if him didn't exist within the system. The battlefield fell into a stunned silence. Even the players watching the live streams were utterly baffled. Is my game lagging? Thank God. I thought it was just me. What are they doing? A staring contest? Is this what battles between powerhouses look like? Intense internal monologues before the fight starts? Can they narrate their thoughts out loud? We're bored over here. 303 was visibly panicking now. If him couldn't be deleted, the only option left was to defeat him using skills or weapons. But even with administrator privileges, defeating him in combat was a near impossible task. He knew him was immune to fire damage, dragon breath, and projectile attacks. In other words, ranged damage was useless. That left close quarters combat. But how could anyone get close to him? With teleportation, flight, and the ability to manipulate obsidian, him was untouchable. Victory was a pipe dream. Chapter 83 System Error. Just as 303 was deep in thought, him suddenly flashed a strange smile. Can't find my data? The moment those words escaped him's lips, 303 froze. How does he know? His gaze toward him now was akin to seeing a ghost. Never in his wildest dreams had he imagined being threatened by an entity generated within the game. Worse yet, it seemed this creature could read his thoughts. He even knew about the existence of data. This is AI gaining sentience, isn't it? The battlefield was deathly quiet, and him's words echoed clearly, falling into the ears of the surrounding players. One by one, their faces turned pale. Wait, what did he just say? Something about data? Not just any data. He said, can't find my data, didn't he? Judging by GM 303's reaction, it looks like him hit the nail on the head. Yeah, earlier, 303 obliterated the first him clone instantly. But this time, he's been standing here doing nothing for ages. So, that first one must have been a decoy. And GM was trying to locate the real him's data just now. If that's true, then him must have erased his own data, making it impossible for the GM to remove him. Whoa, that's insane. Dude, I think you're onto something. Although the exchange between him and 303 had been brief, the players had already pieced together most of the puzzle. Judging from 303's dumbfounded expression, it was clear him's words weren't baseless. Goosebumps erupted across the player's skin. Him hadn't even lifted a finger, yet he'd already forced the GM, the supposed god of this virtual world, into a corner. A GM, the overseer, the administrator, the one holding ultimate authority in the game, was rendered powerless by a single sentence. If even the GM couldn't handle him, then who could? Then there was the chilling implication of him's words, can't find my data. It meant him was fully aware of how GMs dealt with threats, by accessing and deleting their data. Anticipating this, he'd either hidden himself preemptively or, more terrifyingly, never had data to begin with. If the latter were true, then what was him exactly? Born within the game, possessing human-like consciousness, unmatched power, and no traceable data? The players shivered at the thought. What is he? Something born in a game but not made of data? That's way above my pay grade. Then there's only one answer, he's a god. Honestly, as crazy as that sounds, everything about him has been absurd from the start. 303, on the other hand, was under crushing pressure. As an administrator, he'd been completely outclassed by something that should have been his creation. Where was his dignity? Yet, no matter how much he wanted to turn the tide, he couldn't. His only hope of victory was to locate him's data. But it was becoming increasingly clear, he wasn't going to find it. What even? Before he could finish, him's glowing white eyes swept over him. The next moment, the entire screen went black. One line of text appeared. System Character. Then the game capsule shut down. Mo Jiang sat in the capsule, stunned. It took him a long time to regain his composure. How is this even possible? System errors weren't unheard of. But for the state-of-the-art capsules at 0 Point Corporation, something this basic shouldn't even be conceivable. Mo Jiang refused to believe it was a malfunction. He could only think of one possibility. Him had forcibly hacked into his system, causing the error. The realization sent chills down his spine. What is him? As a programmer, Mo Jiang prided himself on his knowledge of data. But at this moment he found himself questioning everything. Could Data really develop consciousness? Or was him never Data to begin with? Was he something closer to pure sentience? If it was the latter, then this wasn't just a technical anomaly. It was a supernatural event. The more Mo Jiang thought about it, the more unsettled he became. He decided to report this to Old Wu. Coincidentally, as he exited the capsule, Old Wu was already approaching him. How did it go? West. Mo Jiang shook his head. He's not Data. I can't delete him. Old Wu's face darkened. Just as he opened his mouth to scold, Mo Jiang interrupted and recounted the entire incident. If you don't believe me, check the repair logs. Mo Jiang added. Each mission left behind a log, and Mo Jiang was confident in proving he wasn't lying. Hearing this, Old Wu fell silent. While he didn't know Mo Jiang well, anyone who could work at 0 Point had to be competent. Mo Jiang wouldn't fabricate such a bizarre story. And besides, him had always been shrouded in mystery. Old Wu frowned. Copy the logs for me. I'll take this to the higher-ups. Mo Jiang nodded and turned to fetch the files, but Old Wu stopped him. Wait, did you rescue Yonghui's people? Mo Jiang froze. I was supposed to rescue them too? Old Wu's anger surged. This whole mission had been to placate Yonghui's faction. Their backing by a powerful conglomerate meant the company couldn't afford to ignore them. Even if him wasn't eliminated, the least Mo Jiang could have done was free Yonghui's people. But now, not only had him survived, Yonghui's people were still trapped. Old Wu nearly erupted into a string of curses but held himself back. There was no time for that. They had bigger problems to solve. Grabbing the backup files, Old Wu stormed off toward the executive office. Back in the game, GM 303 had disappeared mid-sentence. Him, however, remained perfectly intact. It didn't take a genius to figure out what had just happened. Him had won. The players stared in stunned silence, their faces burning with embarrassment. So, him beat the GM in one move. What kind of high-level showdown is this? Everyone's just getting insta-killed. How's that possible? GMs are supposed to be invincible. Maybe it wasn't an insta-kill. Maybe he just got booted from the game? The players in the game and those watching through streams were all equally dumbfounded. The events had unfolded so fast that no one could process what had just happened. GM 303 arrived. Him disappeared. Him reappeared. GM vanished. The entire battle lasted barely a second. The most absurd part? The one left standing was him. When the GM had first shown up, everyone had expected an epic fight. But deep down, they had already anticipated the outcome. After all, no matter how powerful him was, he was just a creation within the game. The GM, with complete administrative authority, should have been unbeatable. Even him's diehard fans had secretly assumed this. Yet now, the impossible had happened. Chapter 84, You Know I Exist. Deep down, doubts still lingered in everyone's hearts, and most leaned toward believing the GM would come out victorious. But reality defied all expectations. GM had been kicked out of the game, by him. It had been over a minute since GM 303 was ejected from the game. The battlefield was silent as the grave. Not until him vanished did the players erupt like a boiling cauldron. What the hell did I just see? How is this even remotely fair? If even the GM can't handle him, this game belongs to him from now on. Is it possible the GM didn't lose and just ran out of power in their gaming pod? You might as well say the entire company had a power outage. Do you even believe yourself? Come on, the stuff about him before was already crazy, but this? This is just breaking the rules of reality. That's it. I'm switching sides. Playing against him isn't even an option anymore. The players were collectively floored. To be fair, the player base in Minecraft had been unusually tolerant of him. From the moment Steve encountered the white-eyed monster and became him to the events leading up to today, him had already wiped out countless players. Yet, the rate of player exodus due to him wasn't particularly high. Since him's discovery, only the higher-ups of the Cloud Soar Guild had quit the game. Many players filed complaints about him with the developers, but it felt more like a precautionary measure. Even knowing him existed, they didn't plan to quit. After all, the game world was massive. What were the odds of encountering him? Deep down, those who reported him felt conflicted. They wanted to see him and didn't want to see him. For gamers who had been playing for so long, encountering a sentient monster was unprecedented. There was no denying the curiosity him sparked in everyone. Still, they feared him. All they knew about him came from live streams or forum posts. And in every post, players who opposed him described nothing but despair. The overwhelming pressure him exerted left them suffocated, even if most players hadn't experienced it firsthand. It was enough to watch others suffer. That was the paradox. They wanted him in the game but didn't want him near them. For ordinary players, him's presence was fascinating. They played for fun. If him killed them, so what? They could revive, rebuild, and keep going. To them, him added a layer of mystery to the game. But for the major guilds? Him was a nightmare. Him's existence threatened their profits and power. It was common knowledge that him targeted large guilds. When him struck, a guild crumbled in an instant, erasing all their hard work. Just look at what happened to Cloud Soar and the now-defeated Eternal Radiance Guild. Cloud Soar had it better, at least they left the game willingly. But Eternal Guild? They were trapped in the game, unable to log out or even die. That level of despair was incomparable. Eternal Glory's players now understood Cloud Soar's pain. They looked like withered vegetables, drained of hope. There's really no way out? After all my years of gaming, this is the first time I've seen something like this. Bravo, 0 Point Studios. So quitting is our only option? Tianheng, the guild leader, scanned his defeated members. The ferocity in his gaze had been ground down by him, leaving only helplessness and exhaustion. Boss, didn't the syndicate say they'd handle this? Someone asked weakly. The financial backers behind Eternal Glory were influential and had even provided a 20 GB folder of evidence to 0 Point Studios to ensure the issue was taken seriously. 0 Point, for all its power, wouldn't outright ignore them. But Tianheng shook his head bitterly. No idea. I'm guessing 0 Point is in chaos right now. Do you think they'll at least give us an explanation? Tianheng knew they wouldn't eliminate him. But with their backers pressuring 0 Point, something would have to be done. What that something was, even Tianheng couldn't say. After leaving Eternal Glory's base, Xu Yuan didn't return to 007 or the Ender Dragon. Instead, he teleported to a nearby plane. The sun was setting, casting a fiery glow over the land. Xu Yuan stood with his back to the sunset, his shadow stretching long across the ground. Though there was no wind, the black silhouette swayed ever so slightly, as if containing a vast, untamed power waiting to erupt. Xu Yuan studied his shadow and smirked. Enjoying yourself back there? The moment he spoke, a sinister energy surged forth, trying to invade his consciousness. But it found no opening. Don't waste your energy. It won't work, Xu Yuan said calmly. The shadow seemed to hesitate, then intensified its efforts. Xu Yuan, unfazed, sat down to wait it out. After half an hour, the energy finally subsided. Then, a familiar, cold voice echoed in his mind. You know I exist? Though deep and venomous, the voice couldn't hide its surprise. Xu Yuan grinned. Know you? You're just my shadow. The voice flared with rage. The shadow on the ground began to twist and distort violently. You have no right to use this body. It's mine. Amused, Xu Yuan gazed at the writhing shadow. Really? You think it was your power that took control earlier? The shadow stilled, as if struck by his words. Moments later, ripples formed again, and the voice returned, trembling with disbelief. Satisfied, Xu Yuan nodded. He was about to speak when the voice cut him off. So what if it's you? This body will be mine eventually. And you're only fit to be my shadow. Xu Yuan chuckled, shaking his head. If you could have done it, you would have by now. You pride yourself on being a master of data manipulation, don't you? What's wrong? Finding it useless against me? He paused thoughtfully. Oh, and you also like exploiting people's deepest fears, right? But can't figure out what I'm afraid of. The shadow stilled once more. After a long silence, the voice returned, tinged with panic and disbelief. How do you know? The fear in its tone was evident. Xu Yuan's grin widened. He had guessed right. From the moment the voice first appeared, Xu Yuan had sensed something was off. Now it was all clear. Chapter 85 Plan to Control the Dark Thoughts. Since the Death Knight had already made an appearance, it was only a matter of time before the rest of his subordinates showed up. When Xu Yuan first faced the Eternal Guild, he experienced an unprecedented thrill from the chaos and destruction wrought by evil. It was right after that encounter that a voice echoed in his mind. He didn't need to guess. He knew the voice belonged to the Dark Sovereign, Null, also known as Zero Value. Null was one of him's most fearsome subordinates. With his pitch-black form and glowing white eyes, identical to him's, many fan theories suggested that Null was a manifestation of him's dark side, born from his malevolence. Wielding the Sword of Annihilation, Null could unleash devastating destruction with each strike. His mastery of fear allowed him to see deep into a person's heart, delivering a fatal blow by exploiting their deepest fears. He could even invade systems, causing error messages labeled Nulk to appear. As him's shadow, Null was a being of pure malevolence, a true nihilistic overlord. He hated the world and dealt with anything he despised using one word: kill. After realizing Null's existence, Xu Yuan was unsure how to summon him into a physical form. There was no manual for these things. So, he set the matter aside and began researching the possibilities, one step at a time. Unexpectedly, he soon felt a dark energy bubbling within him every day, trying to seize control of his consciousness. Although its strength was limited, preventing it from succeeding, Xu Yuan had no doubt, it was Null attempting to take over his body. While Xu Yuan pondered how to address this issue, he encountered GM 303. After defeating GM 303's avatar, Xu Yuan was left unsettled. He had no idea if GM 303 could erase him. Was he part of the game's data? Or something else entirely? When Xu Yuan couldn't make sense of it, Null's voice echoed in his mind again. Hearing that voice instantly calmed him. Null was, after all, a creation of Xu Yuan's darkest thoughts, a part of him. They shared the same origin. Null wasn't just ruthless, he was calculating. Like Xu Yuan, he wouldn't fight a battle without a plan. If Null claimed to have a way to deal with GM 303, Xu Yuan believed him. At this stage, Xu Yuan didn't yet have the ability to manipulate game data. Against GM 303, he was at a clear disadvantage. So, when the showdown came, Xu Yuan let Null take over his consciousness. Using Null's power, they infiltrated GM 303's system, kicking him out of the game. Once the job was done, Xu Yuan wrested back control of his mind. Judging by Null's surprised reaction, he likely thought he had fully taken over Xu Yuan's consciousness. That battle with GM 303 had also helped Xu Yuan understand himself better. Through Null's ability to read hearts, Xu Yuan gained insight into GM 303's thoughts during the fight. It turned out Xu Yuan wasn't tied to the game's data structure. GM 303 couldn't locate any information on him. However, GM 303 could find the data tied to Xu Yuan's avatars, which were based on slime evolution mechanics from the game. While the data was corrupted, GM 303 could still track its source and eliminate it. But Xu Yuan's true form wasn't bound by such constraints. This revelation gave Xu Yuan leverage over Null. Since Xu Yuan's existence wasn't tied to game data, Null couldn't control him by data invasion. Furthermore, as a shadow of Xu Yuan's darker thoughts, Null couldn't fully comprehend Xu Yuan's mind. Without a physical form, Null was essentially powerless. It was like facing an opponent who couldn't use 2/3 of their abilities, while the third remained undeveloped. Null stood no chance. This realization prompted Xu Yuan to reach out to Null for negotiation. The dark entity no longer posed a threat to him. The new challenge was figuring out how to make Null submit and eventually summon him into a physical form. Once Null was fully under his control, Xu Yuan would have nothing to fear. What puzzled Xu Yuan now was how to acquire Null's skills. He had hoped that defeating GM 303 would unlock some kind of creative mode. But no, he got absolutely nothing. No skills. No points. Not even a lousy notification. Then again, GM303 wasn't a true game entity, so it made sense. As for Null, killing him was out of the question. He was a core member of the Undead Legion. The only way to obtain his skills was to fully tame him and take it from there. Xu Yuan thought for a moment. First, I need to deal with Null's rebellious attitude. As Xu Yuan's darker side, Null was cunning and dangerous. While he couldn't read Xu Yuan's heart now, that might change if he gained a physical form. With this in mind, Xu Yuan reached out, his hand brushing against the shadow on the ground. The moment they touched, a system notification popped up. Life signature detected. Consume 10 million fear points to activate the life signature. Xu Yuan's eyes lit up. So this is how fear points are used? If he could gather 10 million fear points, Null's physical form could be activated. Once summoned, Xu Yuan figured he'd also gain Null skills. At least, that was his assumption. The truth would only reveal itself when the summoning was complete. The control was entirely in Xu Yuan's hands. Null's existence hinged on Xu Yuan's decision. Knowing this, he opened the Fear Points shop. To his surprise, his Fear Points had already climbed past 1 million. Not bad, he murmured. Fear Points were generated from players' fear of him. Even without doing anything, his points grew rapidly. Xu Yuan now had a clear plan. While his Fear Points accumulated, he needed to grind down Null's defiance. Null's constant attempts to seize his body were annoying but manageable. Null was born from Xu Yuan's negative emotions. By maintaining a calm mind and suppressing his darker thoughts, Xu Yuan could weaken Null over time. Eventually, Null would have no choice but to accept Xu Yuan as the boss. Meanwhile, Xu Yuan prepared for the inevitable arrival of Entity 303. Though he knew what scared 303, that trump card would only work if their power levels were similar. Taming Null and acquiring his skills was crucial. Looks like it's time to pay the Eternal Guild a visit, Xu Yuan decided, eager to collect the kill points he had been farming. He knew these players couldn't stay online forever. If they started quitting the game en masse, he'd lose his chance to harvest their points. Elsewhere, in the 0 Point Company conference room, a group of executives looked anxious. Several top-tier programmers, hired externally, were gathered around a screen, repeatedly watching a video. The programmers' expressions grew increasingly grim. One executive finally broke the silence. "Brother Jiang, what's going on? Yeah, is it that bad? Can him even be stopped?" Brother Jiang sighed, closing the video. His furrowed brow hadn't relaxed since he began watching. "It's complicated," and the room fell silent again. Chapter 86, Announcement. Him has been removed from the game. I've worked in this field for so many years. This is the first time I've encountered something like this. Problem. If you want to erase him, the only way is to shut the servers down. Brother Jiang's words were frank. Even he, a seasoned veteran in the industry, had never imagined a game could generate an autonomous consciousness entirely unrelated to data. To put it plainly, there was now a sentient being inside the game. This wasn't something mere code could fix. Him had no associated data or information. The only way to make him disappear was to stop the game servers. Without the game, he wouldn't exist. But 0 Point Corporation would never consider such an option. They'd spent 10 years developing this game. How could they shut it down so easily? When the executives heard this, they were stunned. What? Shut the servers down? Brother Jiang, don't joke around. You know how much effort we've put into this game. Isn't there any other way? Brother Jiang could only shake his head with a bitter smile. Even if you brought in the best hackers in the world, the result would be the same. This isn't a data issue at all. If shutting down the servers isn't an option, there are still alternative approaches to handle the problem. Brother Jiang might not have a way to eliminate him, but resolving the current situation? That was within his expertise. He'd reviewed plenty of complaints from players. And the truth was, players weren't demanding the removal of him. What they really wanted was an official explanation. At its core, the frustration stemmed from the players feeling underpowered compared to him's overwhelming strength. Moreover, despite the buzz, very few players had actually encountered him. The player retention rates were still relatively stable. So, him himself wasn't the issue. The problem was the lack of communication and the players' desire for clarity. Additionally, some players complained about their lack of skill. Addressing these issues didn't require targeting him directly. A better approach would be to consider what the players wanted, improve the gameplay experience, shift their focus, and reassure the affected ones. As for him, Zero Point Corporation didn't need to treat him like a plague. On the contrary, they should leverage him as a unique selling point. After all, how many games out there could claim to have a sentient anomaly like him? Marketed properly, the concern wouldn't be about player retention but whether the servers could handle the influx of new players. The executives, still puzzled by Brother Jiang's words, waited for further clarification. Sighing at their confusion, he continued. First, soothe Yonghui Group's nerves. They're just looking for someone to take responsibility. Find someone to take the blame. Once they have an explanation and a graceful way out, they won't pursue this further. Then, shut the servers down for a day and roll out an update. Release an official guide detailing the monsters and other relevant information. Implement that free combat mode you've been working on and add a decent mod to enhance player skills. Redirect their focus to mastering the game itself. Make them channel their energy into exploring the game mechanics. And finally, issue an announcement stating him has been removed. That should resolve most of the problems. You had to admit, Brother Jiang's experience and insight were unparalleled. As a close friend of Minecraft creator Notch, his advice was invaluable. Initially, the company had considered reaching out to Notch himself, but he'd been on vacation for ages, completely uninvolved in corporate affairs. And since this issue hadn't impacted the company's profits, yet, the executives were reluctant to disturb him. Hence, they invited Brother Jiang, a top-tier programmer and expert in game operations, to provide a solution. In truth, how many players had really encountered him? Other than the Guild Master, Vice Guild Master, and a few higher-ups from Eternal Guild who quit in frustration, the average player was unaffected. For most players, him was a non-issue. Many complaints were simply bandwagoning. People submitted them expecting the company to take notice and potentially offer some perks as compensation. As for Eternal Guild, Brother Jiang had looked into it. They had brought this on themselves by provoking him. Not wanting to take the blame, they turned to the company to save face. So the solution was simple. Appease the average player, find a scapegoat for Yonghui, and market him's mysterious nature. After hearing Brother Jiang's plan, the executives mulled it over. Should we really add free combat mode? Notch advised against it for the early stages, preferring to introduce it later for variety. After all, what set our game apart was its lack of free combat, which attracted players in the first place. In this era of fully immersive games, most titles featured high levels of combat freedom. What made Minecraft stand out was its novel approach, eschewing this trend. Understandably, the executives hesitated to introduce free combat too early, fearing it might undermine the game's uniqueness. Brother Jiang, hearing this, chuckled in disbelief. It seems you don't really understand Notch. Hasn't he ever told you why he created this game? The executives exchanged puzzled glances. Minecraft was never about restricting player freedom as a unique selling point. The essence of the game lies in its name. It's the player's world. They can do whatever they want. No main quests, no missions, not even official guides. He never wanted players to chase achievements or compete for rankings. He wanted them to find their comfort zone, a refuge from the chaos of real life. That's all there is to it. Brother Jiang paused, letting his words sink in. Notch initially opposed free combat mode because he wanted players to explore the world and their own desires first. But now that him has appeared, players' goals have shifted. Their needs are different. We can't label this change as good or bad. All we can do is adapt to it. Adding free combat mode won't change the game's core. It'll simply make battles more fluid and adventurous for certain players while leaving others, builders, farmers, fishers, unaffected. The executives felt as though a fog had lifted. We get it now. Brother Jiang, we owe you so much. Seriously, we wouldn't have survived this without you. As the executives showered him with praise, Brother Jiang waved them off and stood to leave. But before he could step out, someone stopped him. Awkwardly fidgeting, They hesitated before blurting out their question. Why do we need to announce that him has been removed? Hearing this, Brother Jiang mentally face-bombed. Notch, no wonder you needed a break. There isn't a single competent soul in this company. Just then, his phone buzzed with a notification. Breaking news. AI gains sentience? 0 points Minecraft features a living entity. Seeing the headline, Brother Jiang let out a sigh of relief. Chapter 87. If I'm going down, they're going down with me. The timing of this notification couldn't have been better. It saved Brother Jiang a lot of explanation. He quickly handed his phone to the executives gathered around him. The group of higher-ups leaned in, their expressions shifting from confusion to outright astonishment. After seeing the push notification, they finally pieced everything together. The news about him had spread beyond the confines of the game, reaching the wider public. This wasn't just a controversy anymore, it was a golden opportunity for publicity. Him isn't a threat to the game, it's our selling point. Exactly. Think about it, what other game has something like him? This is unique to us. A sentient entity created within the game? This alone is enough to go viral. The executives exchanged enthusiastic nods, their excitement palpable. Seeing their sudden enlightenment, Brother Jiang wiped the sweat from his forehead. Honestly, he couldn't understand why Notch trusted this group of people in the first place. But to be fair, most of them were shareholders, not developers. It was natural for them to miss the finer details of game development. After politely seeing Brother Jiang out, the executives immediately got to work. The free combat mode and mod features had already been approved internally, so deploying them would be quick. All they had to do was upload the update. One day should be enough, one of them remarked confidently. Once Brother Jiang left, the executives summoned Lao Wu to finalize the arrangements. Prepare a full server update, one of the executives ordered. Add the free combat mode and include a moderate-level mod for the players. Draft a few options for us to choose from later. And make sure to announce the maintenance downtime as soon as possible. Lao Wu nodded, turning to leave, but before he could step out, one of the executives called him back. By the way, who was responsible for handling the him situation earlier? Lao Wu hesitated for a moment before answering. It was a young guy named Mo Jiang. The executives exchanged glances and nodded. Tell him not to come in tomorrow. Lao Wu froze, the words catching him off guard. He opened his mouth, ready to defend Mo Jiang, but the executives had already dispersed, engrossed in their respective tasks. Their indifference made Lao Wu sigh deeply. It seems there's no saving him. Lao Wu wasn't new to this industry. He understood all too well that there was no room for sentiment in corporate hierarchies. The truth was, Mo Jiang had made the wrong call. If Mo Jiang had prioritized rescuing the players first when he entered the game, the situation might have played out differently. After all, saving the players would have given the company a way to spin the narrative positively. But by focusing on him first, Mo Jiang left the corporate overlords of Yonghui Group with no graceful way to back out. Ironically, Mo Jiang's decision, while flawed in execution, was ultimately in the company's best interest. Yet here he was, about to be thrown under the bus for it. This was how the corporate world worked. The thoughts and feelings of those at the bottom didn't matter. Guilt gnawed at Lao Wu. If only he had warned Mo Jiang earlier, perhaps things would have turned out differently. All I can do is hope he learns from this, Lao Wu muttered to himself. When Lao Wu finally reached Mo Jiang's desk, the walk there had felt unnaturally long, though the distance wasn't far. Mo Jiang looked up, curiosity evident on his face. How did it go? Mo Jiang asked eagerly. I heard the higher-ups even called in Brother Jiang. Is the issue resolved? Lao Wu hesitated. Seeing Mo Jiang's innocent expression made him feel even worse. But he knew someone had to play the villain here, and that someone was him. Suppressing his emotions, Lao Wu spoke coldly. You don't need to concern yourself with that anymore. Just don't come in tomorrow. Mo Jiang blinked, completely baffled. Lao Wu steeled himself and continued, You failed the task assigned to you. You're being dismissed. Your salary for the month will be rounded up, and you can collect it from accounting. No need to file a resignation letter. Before Mo Jiang could protest, Lao Wu turned and left, not giving him a chance to respond. The moment Lao Wu disappeared, murmurs erupted from nearby colleagues. Wow, even Mo got fired? Good thing I didn't take that task. I heard Yonghui's corporate backers are pulling strings. This was always going to end with Mo taking the fall. Mo Jiang was well respected among his colleagues for his technical skills and friendly demeanor. So while his co-workers felt sorry for him, they also understood the harsh realities of the workplace. Mo Jiang, meanwhile, stood frozen in place. He didn't snap out of his daze until someone from accounting handed him his pay slip. "Here's your paycheck," the accountant said, placing it in his hands. "It'll be deposited into your account within the hour." Left with no choice, Mo Jiang silently began packing his belongings. He didn't make a scene. If anything, he wanted to leave with some semblance of dignity. But deep down, resentment boiled within him. "This godforsaken company," he muttered under his breath. "If they want to mess with me, fine. But if I'm going down, I'll make sure to drag them down with me." Meanwhile, Xu Yuan teleported to the Eternal Guild's base. As soon as he arrived, he overheard the players chatting excitedly. "Did you see the announcement? Server maintenance starts in an hour. We're saved. Do you really think the update will let us out? Of course. Why else would they take the whole server offline? Nah, they're just adding some new combat mode or something. Still, it's nice to have hope, isn't it?" Their chatter was cut short when someone spotted him. "Oh crap. Hi. Yeah." Before anyone could react further, a series of explosions rocked the area. Within seconds, the obsidian floor was littered with all kinds of equipment. Xu Yuan glanced at the loot but didn't bother collecting it. His inventory space was limited, and setting up a collection system here would have been too much trouble. After all, he still had his dignity as the Demon King to uphold. Having finished off the Eternal Guild players, Xu Yuan teleported away again, reappearing near 007 and the Ender Dragon. The two were playing together, seemingly carefree. But Xu Yuan couldn't shake his unease. He'd overheard the players' discussion about the upcoming update. While server maintenance wouldn't affect him directly, since he wasn't tied to the game's data, he wasn't so sure about 007. 007 was different. Born from the fusion of game entities, he had evolved into a sentient being. But his core was still rooted in game data. What if the update erased him? Just then, 007 stopped playing and approached Xu Yuan, his expression serious. "Kiddo, let's take a break," 007 muttered to the Ender Dragon before kneeling before Xu Yuan. "My king," he said solemnly, "you once promised I could follow you forever. No matter what happens, I will remain by your side. I'll always be your loyal servant." Xu Yuan stared at him, the unease in his heart growing stronger. Chapter 88 Server Maintenance. "The king's will is my guiding star. My heart aligns with its path." Hearing 007's solemn declaration, Xu Yuan finally put his concerns to rest. The evolution of 007 into a Death Knight was fueled by one word: faith. Initially, 007's faith was solely focused on Xu Yuan. After their separation, that faith shifted to a small bug Xu Yuan had given him as a keepsake. Despite enduring unimaginable torment, it was this unwavering faith that kept him going. Xu Yuan believed that 007's faith would persist, no matter the challenges ahead. With that reassurance, Xu Yuan stopped overthinking and opened the system interface. The recent massacre of over 60,000 players from the Eternal Guild had provided him with a significant haul of kill and fear points. His kill points had skyrocketed to over 70 million. That's less than I expected. He had assumed the Eternal Guild would contribute a larger bounty of kill points. Yet the results were underwhelming. Then again, it made sense. Most of the players on the Radiance Guild side had already been wiped out multiple times by the Ender Dragon. Their kill points were reset to 0 with each death. Later, they had been preoccupied with preparations for the war and had no time to replenish their points. As for the Eternal Guild players, they had spent most of their time feeding 007. The bulk of the kill points they had initially provided was a one-time boon. After that, the contributions had dwindled. Only the remnants from Yonghui's faction had managed to offer a modest amount. Although it didn't meet Xu Yuan's expectations, The accumulated kill points were more than sufficient to unlock Epic Siege 3. Well, guess I'll start with Epic Siege 3 after the server goes live again. Xu Yuan wasn't sure what the game update would bring, but the fact that GM303 had been forcibly ejected from the game was proof that something significant was in motion. The developers wouldn't let this slide without taking action. If they weren't sending another GM to erase him, they were surely working on alternative strategies. Perhaps a server shutdown to try to eliminate him, enhancements for the players, or even the introduction of new game mechanics or monsters specifically designed to counter him. Xu Yuan didn't know for sure, but he was certain of one thing. The update wouldn't be a simple maintenance patch. Delaying his plans until after the update was the safest course of action. A rollback or reset during the update would ruin any progress he made beforehand. For now, he had a tentative plan. Once the servers reopened, he would activate Epic Siege 3 and retreat to a seaside area with 007 and the Ender Dragon. Fishing, farming, building houses, and raising pigs, he planned to embrace a quieter side of the game for a while. It wasn't about taking a vacation. His real goal was to distance himself from the endless slaughter and chip away at Null's volatile personality. Bringing Null into the physical realm was inevitable, but it had to be done when he was fully prepared. Anything less would be a recipe for disaster. This was Xu Yuan's current top priority. As for the game's update, the immediate threat to him seemed minimal. The only real danger left was Entity 303, and Xu Yuan believed their encounter wasn't far off. He needed to be absolutely ready before that happened. Once Epic Siege 3 was activated, he wouldn't have to worry about kill points for a while. The announcement of the game's update caused an uproar among players. The forums exploded with speculation. Breaking! Is the server shut down an attempt to erase him? GM versus him. GM defeated. Update incoming. What does it all mean? Server shutdown imminent. Join the him discussion here. Him is trending everywhere, even on international forums. Vote. Should him be removed or stay in the game? Although the update announcement was the main topic, most discussions inevitably circled back to him. GM gets annihilated by him, and suddenly there's an update? Are they planning to erase him during maintenance? Doubtful. Him doesn't have any data to erase, right? Unless they shut the servers down permanently. Resetting the server might work, but no one would stand for that. Doesn't this prove the devs can't handle him? Guess we'll only know after the update. Honestly, I don't want him gone. The game's way more interesting with him around. True. Him doesn't bother regular players, and we get front row seats to the chaos. Petition to keep him in the game. Despite their fear of him, many players didn't want him removed. He had become the game's defining feature, a living legend that sparked endless discussion. Even players on external platforms were catching wind of him's fame. His name was spreading like wildfire across the internet. An hour passed quickly. The game began its shutdown countdown. Server shutdown countdown, 003. Server shutdown countdown, 002. Server shutdown countdown, 001. With the countdown's end, the game world was plunged into darkness. Xu Yuan's vision blacked out. He didn't know how much time had passed before he finally regained consciousness. When he opened his eyes, he found himself in an endless void. Nothing but infinite darkness stretched out before him. So this is what the game looks like after a shutdown? Xu Yuan stood there, contemplating. What was his purpose in entering the game? With the Demon King system and him's appearance, the system clearly wanted him to evolve into the ultimate antagonist. But to grow into him, bloodshed was inevitable. Sure, players could respawn, but the overwhelming disparity in power would eventually break them. Just like the members of the Cloud Soaring Guild, most of them had already quit the game. If he continued slaughtering, more players would quit, and the game itself might face shutdown. If that happened, all of Xu Yuan's efforts would be meaningless. Spending eternity in a lifeless void? He'd lose his mind. But if he stopped killing, his strength would stagnate. Even if the game persisted, his life might not. Caught between survival and purpose, Xu Yuan felt a headache brewing. He didn't want to drive players out of the game, he just wanted to survive. But the players would never see it that way. Their goal was simple: conquer the game. Even if they couldn't defeat him now, they would bide their time, grow stronger, and return with vengeance. As he mulled over his dilemma, a faint light flickered in the distance. An exit? Xu Yuan didn't hesitate. He flew toward the light. The journey through the void seemed endless, but the light grew closer. When he finally arrived, he realized the source wasn't an exit. It was a glowing, transparent cube. As he approached, the cube shifted positions. Xu Yuan chased it, only for the cube to teleport again. After several attempts, he noticed a pattern in its movements. Predicting its next location, he teleported ahead and grabbed it. At that moment, a system notification appeared. Spend 100,000 faith points to unlock cube permissions. A faith points item? Cube permissions? What is this thing? Xu Yuan frowned, opening his system panel to check his faith points. With 130,000 points in reserve, he had more than enough to unlock it. Chapter 89, A Glowing Transparent Cube. After giving it some thought, Xu Yuan chose without hesitation. Confirm. Square permission unlocked. A transparent block has been added to your inventory. Please enter the game world to activate its usage. Xu Yuan glanced at his inventory upon seeing the system notification. Sure enough, the transparent block was right there. Placing his hand on it, however, revealed nothing. No details, no name, not even a hint of what it could be. Strange. It was definitely odd. Considering how difficult it was to earn faith points, anything costing 100,000 faith points shouldn't be useless. For a fleeting moment, Xu Yuan thought this might be a command block, but its appearance was completely off. Command blocks had a distinct look, after all. Plus, a command block essentially granted access to in-game commands. Such an overpowered feature couldn't possibly be worth just 100,000 faith points. That price was way too low. Although 100,000 faith points wasn't exactly easy to gather, Xu Yuan had accumulated over 100,000 just by doing nothing. Based on this logic, he ruled out the possibility of it being a command block. Looks like I'll have to open the server to figure this out. The system prompt made it clear. The transparent block would only activate in the game world. Until then, its purpose would remain a mystery. With that thought, Xu Yuan stopped dwelling on it and continued exploring the endless darkness around him, hoping to find a second transparent block. Meanwhile, the game's official servers had been down for a day. Players unable to log in took to the internet, sparking discussions everywhere. Even those who didn't visit the game forums stumbled across debates about him. The name had broken free from the game itself and was dominating online conversations. This, of course, was no coincidence. 0 Hour Corporation was pulling the strings behind the scenes. Although the higher-ups didn't fully understand gaming, they were masters of marketing and publicity. They didn't bother promoting the game's features, development timeline, or unique aspects. Instead, they focused on hyping up him. It worked like a charm. Him's mysterious allure ensured that countless people would download the game just to satisfy their curiosity. As Him's popularity skyrocketed, player retention naturally improved. In this era of trends and buzz, anything that went viral was hard to ignore. If you didn't know about him, you risked looking out of touch. To stay relevant and engage in conversations, people had no choice but to learn about trending topics like him. This was 0 Point Corporation's unique method of attracting players, and it worked spectacularly. But their efforts didn't stop there. Shortly after Jiang left, the company's higher-ups held a meeting to refine the details of the upcoming game update. One major decision was the creation of a dedicated website named Minecraft Encyclopedia. The site organized all in-game information into 10 main categories: items/blocks, creatures/entities, biomes/regions, enchantments/spells, natural generation, world dimensions, buffs/debuffs, multi-block structures, game mechanics, customizable hotkeys. Each category was further broken down into subcategories, providing a clear and comprehensive overview of the game. From mob spawn conditions to attack patterns, damage stats, and loot drops, everything was laid out in detail. True to its name, the site was a complete encyclopedia. While the information covered the basics, it stopped short of offering specific strategies. Complex builds like mob grinders, mob farms, or redstone contraptions weren't included. This left plenty for players to discover on their own. Even just redstone mechanics alone offered endless creative possibilities. Far from worrying about spoiling the game, the developers believed the encyclopedia would inspire players to dive deeper into its mechanics. As for mods, the team decided the first mod to be introduced would be the /blade mod. However, after some persuasion from Lao Wu, the higher-ups agreed to postpone mod integration. Given the scale of the update, players already had plenty to explore. With the introduction of the new free combat mode, players also needed time to adjust. Adding a new weapon mod right away would overwhelm them, so it was better to wait until everyone had adapted. Additionally, the developers introduced a PvP mode, aiming to shift players' focus from him to more engaging competitive gameplay. To further encourage community growth, they launched a video incentive program on the forums, rewarding players for sharing gameplay tips and strategies. This approach not only accelerated player progress but also enhanced the overall gaming experience. It was clear that Zero Point Corporation knew how to deliver. These updates satisfied player demands while keeping the game fresh and exciting. March 3, 12 p.m. An hour before the servers reopened, the official announcement dropped. Official announcement. Dear players, the game maintenance scheduled for March 2, 12 p.m. has been completed. Servers will reopen on March 3 at 12 p.m. Update details. 1. New free combat mode. The game now closely mirrors real-life actions. Players can adopt more flexible combat styles. All in-game items can deal minor damage through throwing or other actions. Discover more possibilities through experimentation. 2. New PvP mode. PvP zones have been added. Players can toggle PvP mode upon entering these areas. 3. HIM removed. HIM has been removed in this update. Enjoy a more immersive gaming experience. The announcement caused an uproar among players. Freedom in combat? Hell yeah. Fighting just got so much more dynamic. Finally, I've been complaining about the restrictive combat mechanics forever. This is a game changer. A holographic game like this definitely needed free combat mode. And PvP? Thank you, devs. Wait, HIM's gone? For real? Are they resetting the servers too? I'm gonna lose my progress if they do. No way. If there was a reset, they would have mentioned it. Bruh, I just joined for HIM. Now they're telling me it's removed. Same. I downloaded this game just to see HIM. Speculation ran rampant. While some players believed the update truly removed HIM, others weren't convinced. The truth would only be revealed when the servers reopened. As the clock struck 12 p.m., players flooded into the game, eager to test the new features. It didn't take long for them to realize just how freak the new combat system was. Holy crap! You can deal damage by throwing coal blocks. Right? Even a block deals 1 point of damage. It's insane. Dude, I just threw my friend. It worked. Did anyone notice the inventory switching feels smoother now? So silky. Major discovery. Dual wielding is a thing now. Left and right hands can use items simultaneously. You can crouch, flip, even somersault. This is wild. True to the developer's promise, the game now faithfully replicated real-world movements, making combat incredibly versatile. Players quickly adapted and began exploring new combat techniques. Naturally, many turned to the forums and the Minecraft encyclopedia for guidance. To streamline the learning process, the developers even added comment sections under every item's data in the encyclopedia. The world of Minecraft was alive again, and players couldn't wait to see what came next. Chapter 90: A Changed World. Players could share their opinions and uses for items within the encyclopedia. It hadn't been long since the website launched, yet several items and creatures already had over 99.99 plus comments. The top trending entries included ender pearls, lapis lazuli, enchanted books, iron golems, and most notably villagers. The villager entry alone boasted the most comments, closely followed by ender pearls. Whoa, what? There are villagers in this game? I've never seen one before. Wait a second, villagers are this amazing? You can trade emeralds for all kinds of stuff? Emeralds are useful? I almost threw them away when I found some mining. Emeralds are probably going to become the currency of the game. Damn, it feels like whoever has the most villagers will dominate the game later on. Don't villagers breed? If you find 2 of them, you're set for life with resources. And these ender pearls, they're practically consumables. Instant teleportation is way too OP. Guess the Endermen are gonna suffer soon. I used to think Endermen were hard to beat, but with the guide, all you need is water. Thanks to the detailed information in the encyclopedia, players quickly identified what mattered most. Villager trading was going to be an essential mechanic for progress. Villagers could trade everything from crop seeds to diamond gear, enchanted books, and weapons. All you needed were emeralds to make the deals happen. Obtaining emeralds wasn't particularly difficult either. You could mine for them, kill evokers and vindicators for drops, or even find them in chests. Sure, evokers and vindicators weren't the easiest mobs to defeat, but they respawned infinitely, meaning emeralds were technically unlimited. Compared to diamonds, emeralds were significantly easier to obtain. After all, with a massive player base, mining in any one area became challenging as resources were finite and slow to regenerate. In the future, villager trading was bound to become essential. The next hot topic was ender pearls. Players who had seen him teleport in the game, or even those familiar with the teleportation abilities of Enderman, were quick to realize the value of ender pearls. Teleportation could be used for offense, defense, and even escape, making it a game changer in every scenario. The item was essentially a miniature artifact. As players pored over the guide, all thoughts of him were swiftly forgotten. Soon enough, a unanimous sentiment emerged among the players. Guys, forget everything else. Let's go find some villagers. Quick, find a village. Grab some villagers and bring them back. Wait, what? There's a village near my base. A bunch of idiots are wandering around there. I'm kidnapping them, Essie. With that, a frenzy erupted in the game as players scrambled to locate villages. Owning villagers was practically equivalent to owning the majority of in-game resources. All they needed to do was capture some villagers, nurture them, and eventually amass enough emeralds to graduate from the game. Both major guilds and solo players began scouring the map for villages, launching what could only be described as a villager hunting spree. Meanwhile, Xu Yuan, enveloped in endless darkness, felt a strong, tearing sensation. Moments later, dizziness overcame him and he lost consciousness. When he opened his eyes again, he was already back in the game. Your Majesty, are you all right? Are you hurt? The first sounds Xu Yuan heard were 007's concerned voice and the faint growl of the Ender Dragon nearby. Seeing both 007 and the dragon safe and sound, Xu Yuan finally sighed in relief. He pondered for a moment before asking 007, "Did anything happen in the last 24 hours?" Xu Yuan couldn't exactly explain the server maintenance to 007. Even if he did, 007 wouldn't understand. So, he chose his words carefully. "Haven't we been together this whole time?" 007 replied, visibly puzzled. Hearing this, Xu Yuan understood. He shook his head and said, "It's nothing." From what he could gather, 007 and the others weren't affected by the server downtime. However, they seemed incapable of perceiving anything during the server's off state. This confirmed that they were still, fundamentally, creations of the game. Even though 007 had developed a sense of self-awareness, he was still a fusion of in-game entities, a zombie and a wolf. Xu Yuan suspected that when Null emerged, its nature would be different. Still, Xu Yuan wasn't worried about 007 being erased. If the game's administrators interfered, he'd handle it himself. There was no way he'd let 007 take the fall. After confirming that both 007 and the Ender Dragon were unharmed, Xu Yuan felt more at ease. His next step was to investigate the latest update and examine Null's behavior. Fortunately, Peng Peng had established a guild base nearby, making it easy to gather intel on the players. Summoning a shadow clone, Xu Yuan teleported to the vicinity of Pingping's guild base and stealthily slipped inside, blending with the surrounding rocks. Just then, Null's voice echoed in his mind. Interesting. This world has changed. Xu Yuan paused, his curiosity piqued. Null, after all, was a product of this world. Born from Xu Yuan's darker thoughts, Null could likely sense shifts in the world more acutely than 007. Since their last conversation, Xu Yuan had ignored Null entirely. The entity hadn't appeared until now, choosing this moment to speak. The timing, following the server downtime, was suspicious. What kind of changes had occurred in this world? Still, Xu Yuan wasn't about to ask Null for answers. That guy was far too treacherous. Even if Xu Yuan asked, Null wouldn't give him a straight answer. With that in mind, Xu Yuan dismissed Null and focused on eavesdropping in Pingping's guild base. The devs met. We spent so much time figuring out crafting recipes, and now they just hand out a guide? What a waste of effort. Having the guide might not be a good thing, though. Now that everyone knows the secrets, resources are gonna get even scarcer. True, but after the update, I think skill is more important than resources. The new free combat mode is gonna widen the gap between pros and casuals. Exactly. We need to train our combat skills. By the way, is it true that they removed him? We were counting on him as a backup plan. Why are you guys still chatting? The guild leader told us to go search for villages and bring back more villagers. Listening in, Xu Yuan pieced together the key points of the update. So, they released a guide and added a free combat mode. The term immediately reminded him of the Minecraft fan animation Revenge of the Villagers. The combat style in that animation was nothing like the original game. It was incredibly fluid and realistic. It mirrored real-world fighting, with players able to execute virtually any move they could imagine. Everything in the game world, tools, blocks, even fishing rods, could be weaponized. Was this world heading in that direction too? In Revenge of the Villagers, him was only one of many forces in the game's universe. The world was divided into factions: the Creature Alliance, the Villager Kingdom, him's faction, and the Player Coalition, among others. Each faction had demigod-level entities with their own goals and beliefs, leading to all-out war. The Villager Kingdom, for instance, emerged in response to players' relentless slaughter and exploitation. Could this world be following a similar path? From the players' conversations, it was clear the guide highlighted the importance of villagers. And as Xu Yuan knew, in the long run, villager trading would be a cornerstone of progress. This world was changing.